of the things that Daniel shared with us is that his lodge has a set of jewels that were purchased from none other than Most Worshipful Brother Paul Revere. Okay, you've got my attention. He also told us something about a Somerset gavel and a Roosevelt trowel. Oh, and on the fact that the lodge charter was signed by Most Worshipful Brother Paul Revere in 1795. Now, we make a big deal about the fact that we have 4 lodge charters in this jurisdiction that predate statehood, and that's cool. But to have a charter signed by a founding father, okay. So yes, I'm interested. And since a lot of people want to know about Masonic history, why not get Masonic history from somebody who's in a lodge that experiences history pretty much every day? And so with that, it's my pleasure to welcome to the District 13 Zoom Worship Brother Daniel Llata, past master, and if memory serves, the 100th past master?
100th master of King Hiram's Lodge, AF and AM, town of Provincetown, precinct of Cape Cod, Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Well,
that's right.
With that, it's all you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, Most Worshipful. That was the first time that I visited your lodge. I never expected that I'd be here tonight. And I'm very excited. I've actually given a similar presentation like this before, but never on Zoom and never quite so detailed. But I'm going to try to boil it down. I've got some nice notes for you all. I'm not going to go on really long, and I had so much to deal with, I decided to keep it down to the first beginnings of our lodge and the beginnings of Freemasonry in the United States, if that's okay. So, getting right into everything here. So yes, my name is Daniel Llata. I joined King Hiram's Lodge in Provincetown 11 years ago. I began as junior steward and worked my way up the ranks. The only seat I never sat in, I was never junior deacon. So that's the only seat I didn't occupy in my rise up. But starting with my lodge, you were saying about having founding fathers and so exciting. And as exciting as that is, I did have a humbling moment when I visited the Union Lodge F and AM on the island of Nantucket when I was presiding Worshipful Master, and the Worshipful Master invited me up to the east and, you know, parade you around as they do. And he said, as quaint as it may sound, Worshipful, to explain that your lodge was chartered by Paul Revere, let me just remind you that in 1760, when our lodge was founded, Paul Revere was still in Demolay. So my lodge is quite young on the block around here. But we occupy the outermost tip of the sandy peninsula called Cape Cod. We are about 120 miles away by road from Boston, or only 40 nautical miles from Boston. And in fact, from the highest point in town, High Pole Hill, we can actually see the skyscrapers of Boston at low tide on a clear day. So you can imagine back 250 years ago, this was a very important part. Also really important to the story I'm about to tell you is that Provincetown has the 3rd deepest natural harbor in the world. I mean, before dredging, only Acapulco and Hong Kong are deeper than Provincetown. So it's a really important strategic area. So I'm going to start right off the bat sharing my screen. I got some pictures for y'all, so if it doesn't work, you let me know. I'm a newbie at this, but here we go. And I did open, oh, here we go, here we go. So the first picture that I'm going to go and hope that it works, and tell me if you see this. Is that working for you? I can't hear anything.
Daniel, did you hit the share button?
I did. Is it not sharing?
No, it's not. So remember,
all right, let's try again. Button.
There we go.
Oh, good. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, so what this is, our lodge has handwritten records that go back 225 years. This is just one page that I happened to grab while I was in there today. It's hard to read, but we've gone through all of them and made a book about them. But anyway, this one here is from the first book, and By December of 1795, Provincetown had already established itself as the birthplace of American government, and Provincetown had already earned the distinction of being the birthplace of American democracy, having been the place where the Pilgrims landed in 1620. If you didn't know that, it wasn't Plymouth, it was here. And the Mayflower Compact was signed in our harbor. We actually were going to be celebrating the 400th anniversary this year, but then came COVID, so everything had to be sidelined. So now we're going to do 401 is the new plan. But it's also the birthplace of the commercial fishing industry in the United States. Established in 1678, it was the first official fishery in the United States. So Provincetown has a very unique history, and at various times in our history, it's either suffered from or profited from the enduring reputation as being a haven for misfits and undesirables. They said that in one certainty is that Provincetown history's path has always been in our way, because we have a bad boy image that goes back to 1680 when fishermen's shacks appeared on the shore, and the town soon earned the title of Helltown. It was known as a wild place. This is from our books here. A notorious den inhabited by a cosmopolitan groups of smugglers, outlaws, escaped indentured servants, heavy drinkers, and moon cussers, who were pirates said to have lured ships to their doom, placing lanterns on the beaches at night, tricking ships to wreck on the bars offshore, and then salvaging the cargo. And with the exception of the pirates and the moon cussers, perhaps anyone who's ever been to Provincetown would agree that not much has changed at all. So I'm going to paint a portrait of the community and the culture in which our lodge was originally founded. There were 40 whalers already in business here at the time of the American Revolution. And they would set out from the outer Cape, which we call ourselves, to Truro and Wellfleet would be the extreme edge of where we are. But the War of Independence devastated the whaling industry and depopulated the town, so there were fewer than 100 people here at the time of the Revolution, which was at that time under the undisputed control of the British Navy. So Provincetown Harbor, I explained it being a very strategic port. The British men of war, the HMS Somerset, was at anchor here at the night of November 2nd in 1778. This was the same British man of war whose guns had stormed Bunker Hill. It had fought in the Spanish-American War. It had fought in the Indian-French War. And that night, there was a big gale. It was coming around the tip of the Cape to find relative safety in Provincetown Harbor. But it was broken up in the surf, and it crashed with a crew of 480 men, 60 cannon. And the people of Provincetown watched it from High Pole Hill, which is right outside my backyard window. The militia captured the captain and surviving men, marched them on foot to Barnstable Town and to Boston. And the wreck of the Somerset was stripped by the people of Provincetown and buried under the sands of the sea for over a century. So 100 years after, he'll be my next picture here, if all goes well. This one here would be me in my regalia. Tell me if it comes up. Can you see that? I can't hear anything.
Not yet, Daniel.
All right. Let me try again. Share screen. How's that? All right. So that's me at my installation as the 100th Worshipful Master of King Hiram's Lodge. So what I'm holding there in my hand is the Somerset gavel, which has several big chips in it because it was blammed pretty hard, most recently in front of the Grand Lodge by the Most Worshipful Grand Master 2 years ago. And around my neck, I'm going to get more into that. That Master's jewel you see is the original Paul Revere jewel. And that apron I'm wearing predates our lodge. I'm going to get to that here in my notes, but that's 1790 apron, and that was from our first Worshipful Master. So I'm going to go back to 1795. Provincetown was a small but thriving maritime fishing community, and everyone who was not actually on the sea was busy at work making supplies for those who were, for salt, rope, sails, harpoons, boats, ship's knees. And Freemasonry at that time was very young in Massachusetts. It was an urban phenomenon that had already been spreading to commercial whaling ports. For example, Salem, Nantucket, New Bedford, and Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia is very important to this story, not being in our country, but it's our sister lodge, 225 years now. But prior to the Revolution, there have been competing Grand Lodges around here. We had several. We had the St. John's Lodge. We had the Grand Lodge of England. We had the New Ancients. We had the Moderns. We had Irish and Scottish regimentary lodges. And also, by the time my lodge was founded in 1795, Prince Hall was already around, being founded in South Boston, near what is today Logan Airport. So I mentioned Hanover being one of those shipping towns. So in Hanover, in 1792, there was John Young, started the lodge over there, which is called, Union Lodge was in Nantucket. It was the Old Colony Lodge. In 1792, unfortunately, his wife, Leah Bonning, died 1 year after that. So he moved to Provincetown, to his family's land. He started his own business here in Provincetown, where he met shipbuilders Solomon and Jonathan Cook. Together, they petitioned for a charter, which was granted on the 12th of December of 1795 by then Grand Master of the new-ish at that point, Grand Lodge of Masons in Massachusetts, Most Worshipful Paul Revere. I'll get to the charter very soon. The first meeting was held at the home of Jonathan Cook, and the new lodge was formed called King Hiram's Lodge, AF and AM. This is important because we have ancient, free, and accepted Masons, but we also have free and accepted Masons here in our own jurisdiction. We have both. So we had two different rituals. We had different squabbling about names, and it wasn't always very fraternal or brotherly, I have to tell you. One really good story about that was when they were joined at the time of the Revolution. There was two different lodges who were the oldest lodges. There was St. John's, which is the oldest lodge in the New World, having been around since 1733. And they met in the Bunch of Grapes Tavern. I don't know if you've heard that word before, but it's considered the cradle of American Freemasonry. They still have the original sign from that in their lodge room in Boston. The other second oldest lodge was St. Andrew's Lodge, the Lodge of St. Andrews, and Paul Revere was a member of that lodge. That lodge was not a toy lodge. They were a patriot lodge, and they met at the Green Dragon. And one night, you've heard about this story, it was the night of the Boston Tea Party. And that night, they got a little tipsy, and they called the lodge from labor to refreshment, and one person said, "We don't discuss religion and politics, and especially not treason against our government." So they didn't want to be arrested for treason, so they painted their faces up as Indians. They ran across the street, and you know what happened. They threw all the tea into the harbor. Fast forward to the American Revolution, and we know how everything ended up. So when the dust was settling, and they had united the Grand Lodges nearly, not quite, the Lodge of St. John said, well, we want to be lodge number 1. But they already had older lodges, newer lodges. It was a very convoluted situation. So the new people in charge, the Patriots, said, you know what? We're not going to let those Tory bastards be called number 1. From now on, we don't use any numbers at all in Massachusetts. And for that reason, we are King Hiram's Lodge, no number, Provincetown, Massachusetts. That's one of my favorite stories. Paul Revere was Grand Master of Masons in Massachusetts from 1795 to 1797. He was already quite a famous patriot, but he had also gotten himself in trouble. He had been court-martialed. He was not universally popular, let us say. But he founded 23 lodges at that time, including what is today the state of Maine, which back then was still part of Massachusetts. Maine is not one of the 13 original colonies. Of those lodges, 19 are still active, including Adams Lodge, which is here in the Outer Cape in neighboring Wellfleet, where I myself am a member, and I've been senior deacon, and I've served as senior warden there myself. So Paul Revere's Masonic ties also extended beyond his career as a patriot, but also into being a silversmith. And it turned out he was the only silversmith in Boston at that time who was also a Mason. So he was able to create unique jewelry of significant Masonic significance. So he created 19 sets of Masonic regalia during his tenure, ranging from 5 to 12 pieces. I'm going to close this and cross my fingers that it works and hope I'm still sharing, but I'm going to oh, there we go. That closed. That's okay. I'm going to open this picture and reshare the screen. Tell me if it works. There we go. Does that work?
Yep.
That's a good. Okay, good. So here we are. This is our set of Paul Revere jewels that we have. There's actually 2 more pieces. There were, he also made 2 past masters jewels. One of them is now on display at the Museum of our National Heritage at Lexington, where the Battle of Concord was taking place. The other is in our case, and I'll show that to you in a moment. So now, where we here, okay, so in 1795, the lodge had 22 members, and we have a new set of jewels, but we didn't have a lodge building. So the first meeting took place in a private home near where I'm sitting tonight, and that was on September 6th of 1796. And on that night, they voted that the lodge would meet every first Monday of every month after the full moon, except during a storm, in which case they would meet on the next fair night. And that we in Provincetown should build a house for our use, including a schoolhouse, because in those days, the government did not pay for schools. That was done by local charities, churches, or the Masons. So we still have the original work order. I'm going to close this, and I know it's going to stop the share, but that's okay, because I know what's coming next. I'm going to close this one here and open this building. Right. Ah, there we go. That's open for me, and now it'll be open for you. Now, there we go. There we go. That work? Yes? Good.
Yep.
So this was our first lodge house, which today is at 118 Bradford Street, then called Back Street. We had Front Street and Back Street. So this building, we have the original work order, and I've read this. It's kind of funny, in fact. It's got some very interesting tales. So this house was built from lumber from Freeport, Maine. The lumber was loaded to a ship at Portland, and I mean the real Portland, har har. It was transported by ship to Provincetown, and the lodge was to be built by members of the lodge to save on expense. And any brothers who did not assist were to be assessed 3 shillings apiece. And Brother Alan Hinckley was commissioned to design and build the structure. And on the work order, it includes a barrel of Jamaican rum and 5 bottles of French brandy is mentioned there. It also mentioned that another brother, not by name, but he had a habit of chewing tobacco and spitting. So when the ship arrived, they were carrying it, dragging it down Commercial Street, up Ryder Street, and to the site. And he would spit his chewing tobacco. And you could always tell where he had been by his chewing tobacco. The building was completed on the 23rd of March, 1797 at a cost of $64.60. That was the total, including the rum and the brandy. And lodge notes of the time said that it was very, very cold in their first opening, and because of the the chill, they were not able to get supply, so they had no oil, so they had to use candles, and everyone was very cold. And this unnamed brother would spit in the corner on the floor of the newly inaugurated lodge room. So the worshipful master, John Young, who I mentioned before, ordered him to buy a spittoon at his own expense. So, and put it next to his chair so he wouldn't spit on the floor. So that building still remains standing today. As it's a guest house. You can read the sign. It's the Clarendon House. And if you come to Provincetown, you can stay there. I heard earlier while I was printing this out that somebody's going to be talking about the Morgan affair. I'm not going to get into the Morgan affair, but there are two important things about the Morgan affair. First, the Morgan affair was the reason that we had to sell this building and go underground. We still met in people's private homes, and we've never missed a meeting for 225 years, including during COVID, much to the dismay and chagrin of our district deputy grand master, but that's how we roll around here. So this building became the first Roman Catholic church before the current Roman Catholic church was built, St. Peter's, over on the other side of town. So after the Morgan affair started to wane, then the lodge again started to enjoy the stature that they previously knew, and started talking about building a much finer building, because now we're getting into better times and making more money and all that for a moment. So they were meeting at the what they call the Oddfellows house, and then the Oddfellows became a thing, so it became a kind of a Masonic sister organization. So let's see, Paul. Oh yes, and the charter. I don't have a picture because I tried. I couldn't get it with a reflection, but it's got two big creases going, one's up and down and one's back and forth. And the reason why is because during the Morgan affair, the worshipful master carried the charter around in his pocket of his breast coat. So, it just gets better and better. So the 1839 was the year that the building was sold. All right. Oddfellows Hall I mentioned. And the current building, here we go. Every time I close this, I know it kicks me off. Let's see if it works this time. Can you see? That work?
Not yet.
No? Does?
No change. No change.
No? Same picture? All right, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to re-share. There we go. That work? All right, so this is our current building. This building was built on the former site of the Customs House. And this is our current home. It was completed in 1857. Used to have 3 floors, that's another story. But the interior contains the furnishings from the previous building. Yep. Oh, I thought I saw a face over there. This is, I took this picture last Christmas time.
That's another story. That was a bit of a laugh for me. I was doing the but-umps.
Yeah, there's a bump. There's plenty of that. I'm trying to keep it short because there's so much. I was telling most worshipful, see this book. Can you see that book I'm holding? Every first Monday, this book goes on and on and on, and that's why I'm only talking about up to the War of 1812. Okay, you see how difficult this could get. So, in the first 10 years of the lodge, we went from 22 brothers to 122 brothers. All right. The revolution, though, had destroyed the fishing fleet I mentioned, and when peace came, the impoverished townfolk were obliged to build smaller vessels to get by. They started moving off the coast of Labrador, where they ran into trouble with the British, who were trying to close Canadian waters to Yankee fishermen. And that's the lifeblood of town life over here, because we don't have arable land. We're fishing and all about fishing over here. So there's nothing to do but fish. So the embargo was followed by the Non-Intercourse Act, which forbade trade with Great Britain and France. That was regarded as necessary to prevent the seizure of American ships and the impressment of their crews into service by foreign powers. And Provincetown crews fared worse than the British as a result. and you could be captured, and you could be sent to work as an indentured servant on a British ship. In 1809, the lodge voted to postpone the annual feast of St. John on account of the badness of the times. And then came the declaration of the war with Great Britain on June 18th of 1811, the War of 1812. So the HMS Majestic, another British man of war, made her base at anchor near the town line between Provincetown and Truro. And they used the old mill at Miller Hill as a target for artillery practice. So that would mean these cannons were firing literally right over my house where I'm sitting right now and blamming into the hill, which I look at every morning when I wash my dishes in my kitchen. So I can imagine what that would have been like in 1812. But the Brothers of King Hiram's Lodge, being entrepreneurs, made the best of the situation. So we all know the Masonic rule against any discussion of religion or politics at lodge. Well, this includes any act of war, doesn't it? So war or peace, war is politics. So you can't discuss war with a brother. So the Worshipful Master invited the chaplain of the HMS Majestic to dinner and to give to say grace basically at King Hiram's Lodge. And no fewer than 7 brothers, they being Masons, signed our guest book on that night of January 8th of 1812. Herman Merrick was the chaplain, he being a Mason. And much merriment was had. They drank a lot of brandy. That's what they like, and they loved Madeira wine. They went through a lot of Madeira wine on that night. Many contracts were signed to supply fish and meat and scallops and lobsters to the invading British Army. And it's said that many fortunes were begun in Provincetown on that night in British gold. But unfortunately for these visiting brethren, the Majestic was boarded and captured by the USS Constitution in 1813 because basically the Brothers of King Hiram's Lodge finked on them right after the event. So they made their money and then told on them. So the old Ironsides, the Constitution, boarded and invaded them. So, and you can still go to that boat in Boston Harbor, as you probably know. So the Non-Intercourse Act. Captured Yankee fishermen were sent to Nova Scotia as indentured servants, I told you, and those refusing to serve were shipped to prison. And Brother Eldridge Smith, whose family still lives here in Provincetown and his generations of Masons, also a member of the lodge, was sent to Dartmoor prison in England, which was the worst place. He spent only 2 nights in Dartmoor prison because soon after his captors learned that he was a Mason, he was released the next morning and sent back to Provincetown, where he lived out his years and died in 1849. So I'm going to close this. I know it's going to kick you off, but that's okay. We'll be right back. I'm going to show you the picture here. Close that one. Here's another one. And back here. The next time, I promise I will have mastered this art so that you can see. Can you see this? All right. So we have, these are all Paul Revere certificates. I didn't mention that he made not only the charter in our lodge room, but also these certificates. And we also have the Past Master's Jewel, which I'm going to open now. I wish it wouldn't keep kicking you off, but here we go. Coming back. And Past Master's Jewel. Can you see that? All right. This is also a Paul Revere Jewel. And these, we only bring them out. We almost never bust these guys out of the case. We use them, especially the Master and Wardens, for installations and for the 3rd degree. But other than that, the only time that we use the entire regalia was for an officer's portrait of everyone sitting together. But other than that, we never use them. Some of them have been banged up, especially the Master's Jewel, which as at my installation fell off of the chain. Okay, so you know, we try not to make such accidents happen, but they do. Here's a photo coming up when I know you kicked off. Some of us are wearing these here in this picture. Coming right back, share screen. Here we are. Can you see that? Yes? Good. So this is also my installation. So these guys here are wearing the actual Paul Revere jewels at this installation because I was the 100th master. So we brought everything out, including the kilts and bagpipes and drums. And right across the street from our lodge, I mentioned we are on the main drag of Provincetown. So when we crossed the street, we had, imagine a day as hot as today in August, but it was packed, packed, packed. And we went to this outdoor bar on the beach. And when we showed up, all these people with their drinks with it, oh my God, I don't know who you guys are, but you sure know how to make an entrance. So we know how to do it up here. I'm gonna show you next the, oh, here we go. Can you see that? No. We'll get it right one day. Don't you worry, and close that one. Stop sharing, I know. And share the screen. Here we go. Open. That's the same picture, isn't it? How's that? Yeah, that is the Roosevelt trowel. Can you see that? Okay. I told you I was going to stick to my time zone. This is the exception. This one here, this is the Roosevelt trowel. And we use this for the 3rd degree, and you know the ritual for that one. So the Roosevelt trowel started its life as a real trowel. It was actually used by brother Theodore Roosevelt, who laid the cornerstone of the Pilgrim Monument, which sits on top of High Pole Hill. I'll show you a picture of that soon. It's the tallest granite structure in the country. And it is the monument to remind the world that the Pilgrims landed here and not in Plymouth, because we've got this friendly rivalry going on. So 3 years later, it was returned to Provincetown as it appears today, covered in silver and inscribed, and it was used a second time by brother President Taft, who presented it to the master of King Hiram's Lodge, and today we use it for our ceremonies. And it is rumored that Taft, who weighed 300 pounds, sat in the master's chair. I don't know how that's possible, but because I sat in that thing, I'm a little guy, and it's a little chair. So let us go a little more. Elder Smith. Oh, 1814 was the end of the War of 1812. The law artifacts from this period show that it was a period of prosperity, because now we have a lot of nice finery. This didn't show up, or did it? Can you see this picture? All right, stop share. This will work, and here we go. How about now? Okay, these are aprons. So everything else that we had was very meager and simple. And even the Paul Revere jewels, I mean, as beautiful and cool as they are, they're very, very simple. Well, now we have these rich silk, Chinese silk aprons showing up with fabulous gold embroidery and hand painted, and lots of money coming in, because this is the whaling years. And Provincetown became the richest per capita place in all of the United States. Now, when I say that, mind you, our population never at any point in our history exceeded 7,000 year-round residents. And even today, we have fewer than 3,000 people living here. So a lot of money divided by not very many people is what we're saying. So I'm going to start wrapping up, but my friend who I'm working with, those handwritten records, I said, my friend is Julia Perry, Dr. Julia Perry, who happens to be the town historian. And while I was master, she came and photographed every page of 225 years of history and has been transcribing it. And she called me about a year ago to apologize, telling me, I'm sorry it's taking so long, but I learned that everything in your book is dovetailing perfectly with my other book that I've been working on, and it's filling in a lot of missing information that she has found concrete evidence that the brothers of King Hiram's Lodge were directly involved in the Underground Railroad during the Civil War, where these ship captains, many of them were Acadian nationals, meaning that they were French Canadians, had ships, Canadian ships, but with French names. And they would use code words like different kinds of fish or whatever, supplies. And they were actively housing escaped slaves in the homes of Brother Masons here in Provincetown and shipping them to Nova Scotia. So that's really exciting for me and us. So hopefully in the future, I'll be able to share that with you. And in closing, I'm just going to show one more photo for you all. And this is just giving you an idea. I'm going to stop the share again, as I have many times, and click on this picture. Can you see this? All right, this is, my friend took this with a drone, all right, about 2 years ago. This is what the town looks like. So we are at the extreme tip of Cape Cod, and you can see that big monument, the one I was talking about. That was the Pilgrim Monument, which was dedicated by Taft and Roosevelt. And my house, can you see the cursor? I live right there. All right. So this was where, over here is where the ships were shooting right over here. Boom, boom. Okay. So anyway, in closing, thank you so much. I hope I didn't bore you all, but if you have any questions or answer, I'll be happy to answer anything that I can.
Dave, why don't you go ahead and stop the share?
Yes, I will stop.
And we'll go ahead and get everybody back on. I'm still surprised that that building cost $64.60 with booze. But yikes. Any event,
and the awesome part that you actually had the cost of the building divided by the number of members, and that was what they had to participate in, either the money or the labor. Isn't that some irony, boys?
So before I open up for questions, I need to ask a question. That's this: How does anybody feel about Daniel Part 2? You like that idea? Because you only took us up you only took us to about 1820.
You know, brother, there's just too much, you know, and it's daunting. I was like, oh my God, I started from the beginning. That's the easiest thing, you know.
Well, we could pick you up like for 1822. You know, we'll go to the 1900s, something like that.
Okay.
So, I'm opening it up. Who has questions? Anybody have a question for Daniel at all? Because I got a couple that I can ask, but
what was the name of the book again?
This book is out of print. It's called Every First Monday. It's done by a former Worshipful master, Worshipful Terrio. And it was made for the 200th birthday of King Hiram's Lodge. So it's 25 years old. And it goes up until, what are they talking about here? I'll flip to the very last page.
You don't have to have a box of 100 of them in the basement somewhere.
It goes to 1975.
There's not a box of 100 of them in a dusty basement, a dusty box in the basement.
There's like 3.
Yeah.
There's like 3. But there's a link I don't have here. I know that there's a lot of this stuff is actually on a website, and I'll share it with Most Worshipful when I find it.
Oh, that's bad. By the way, Daniel, I've got a request for can there be part 2, 3, 4, and 5? So.
Oh my. Okay. Well, you know, during COVID, we got plenty of time, don't we?
We always do. John Davenport, I saw your hands go up. Do you have anything?
Yes. So there was one time I got kicked off a couple times. I apologize. We're having some weird power issues here, but there was one time where you said Paul Revere was the first silversmith to do something in the area, and I didn't get the rest of it, and I missed it.
Sure, that was that's from this book again, and it said that Paul Revere was unique in that although there were a lot of silversmiths in Boston, he was a Mason, and I don't know if there were other silversmiths who were Masons, but as such, he was able to make beautiful Masonic regalia. And
That
he
was
also
one of the things that, as a kid, I read the book Johnny Tremaine, and it's got a very in-depth look into that community at that time and what the different crafts meant to the local area. It was. I just came back from Montana, so one of the booms from the early 1800s to the early 1900s at that time. Take a wild guess. What occupation was the highest paid per day in the Montana Continental Mine? Mason, $7.50 a day. The next closest was $5 a day.
wow. Yeah, there's the Paul Revere Museum still exists in now the North End, which is the Italian part of Boston. And there's a lot of pewter there. He did a lot of pewter mugs and steins and stuff like that, but also silver and also some gold. And I've seen something, I don't know if it's true, but there is a gold locket which comes out only at the Feast of St. John and hangs over the Most Worshipful's chair. Most Worshipful, you might have seen that, and it contains a lock of whose hair? I can't remember. It's not Paul Revere, but I think it's, you know who it is? It's brain fart. The guy who would have been president if they hadn't been killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill. And sorry, I forget the name, and Thad Mason.
My mind's going. Nick Franz, you got that questioning look on your face.
He's an attorney.
I was the one that asked for 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I am just fascinated, and I'll just sit here and listen because this story is absolutely wonderful.
Thanks, Nick. Dave, what you got?
I've got a page of questions, but I'm going to try and narrow it down.
Warren?
John,
What?
go ahead.
Daniel, we talk about Joseph Warren.
Joseph Warren, yes.
Joseph Warren.
Dr. Joseph Warren, right? And they begged him not to fight. And he was a young guy.
And he was a surgeon. So they told, he was a surgeon, and they said, don't go forward. And then he got taken out by a freaking cannonball.
I think you're right. And it happened, the Battle of Bunker Hill, which is actually at Breed's Hill, as we know. But yeah, so he was the first, I think he was the first Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, if I'm not mistaken.
So, David, you had a page.
Page of notes, I guess I should say. Interesting, I was just reading, I downloaded this app, the Constitution app, and it's got some really great context. If anybody's looking for a great Constitution app, we're living in weird times, but it has some really cool associated documents too. And one of them was the Patrick Henry, "Give me liberty, give me death," and he talks about in there on the plains of Boston. I think when I was in Boston, there weren't a lot of planes, but I guess back then there probably were. My question, I didn't realize that there was another tavern. We of course have a lodge out here called St. Andrews, and they celebrate the Green Dragons. They on their Wednesday nights, their social night, they call it Green Dragons. So I didn't realize Bunch of Grapes Tavern was the cradle, as you say.
Yeah, there were rivals, as I said, and the Bunch of Grapes that's the story that I've been told. But that's the rumor anyway. That's the story, and the story is that was the Tory one, the Tory Lodge, and then the St. Andrews was the Green Dragon, that would make sense because it's right there by what used to be the Boston Harbor, which has been filled in now, so it's quite a ways away. It's now far inland, but in those days it would have been kind of literally across the street. And I did go to the Green Dragon. I know that it's not the same place because it burned in a fire, but it's still there. And I went in and it was full of a lot of drunk and rowdy MIT students.
It's awesome. John, I think we might have a new name for our social night, but Bunch of Grapes.
So not to tell too many stories of myself, but back in the 80s when we were playing lacrosse out there, we come down from the academy and a lot of the kids were like, oh yeah, the Green Dragon was the guys that drank flagons of ale, and a Bunch of Grapes was the rich, wine drinkers, the snobs, and everything. And I was like, but they were both kind of on the same side most of the time. Well, yeah, but not all the time.
Yeah, well, there was that whole, the reason why they had the Boston Tea Party was, they called the lodge from labor to refreshment because they knew that they were committing treason. I mean, pure and simple,
I thought it was funny that Ben Franklin made sure that they actually dumped the tea before the 30 days were up so that the ship captains didn't get fined for losing their loads, for not offloading. But simultaneously, they offered to pay for all of the tea. They even replaced the lock they broke to take the tea.
That's good. I did not know that detail.
That's awesome. Right, Worshipful, you got anything?
Just to figure out how my mute button works. No, most Worshipful. Thank you for the program. It was a wonderful program. I look forward to parts 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you come up with. Because
Daniel, we're bringing you back, man.
history fascinates me. It's one thing that'll keep me engaged.
I love it too, and like I said, I've done similar presentations like this in the past, usually at in my own lodge. But one time I got dragged it to the Grand East in front of like 500 people, much shorter. But I actually had the Somerset gavel and the Roosevelt trowel, and I talked about them. And then I invited the entire Grand Lodge officers to have dinner at my lodge, to a whole big uproarious laughter. And I went and sat down, and the senior Grand Warden said, "Did you understand you just invited the whole Grand Lodge?" I said, "Yeah, you got to come too." And they came. They came to, there was the Deputy Grand Master, Senior, Junior Grand Warden, their pursuivants all showed up at my lodge, and all my, everybody else was like, "How'd you get them to come?" I said, "I invited them."
So that's how it works, all right, Worshipful?
Just go ahead.
We all think they fly into their pants, but they just put them on the same way we do.
You're very far away. Okay, I told you we're the farthest east lodge in Massachusetts. It's not a huge state, not like Washington is, but it's going to be a long drive. It's definitely not. You don't go from Boston to Provincetown and go back the same day. No way, especially leaving at night. So you got to stay the night because there's no ferry at night, etc. So yeah, it's a commitment.
Yeah, but that sounds like a fun commitment. We got a couple of visitors from outside of District 13. If either one of you have a question, please chime right in.
Well, I was just going to say that I've been back to Boston a couple times pre my Masonic life or affiliation, and have been to Paul Revere's house to visit, and presentations like this, and just having learned that Paul Revere was a Mason makes me want to go back. I mean, you go to Boston and all the East Coast is just history overload anyway, but just to go back and redo the Masonic history of the original 13 states, pre-revolution and post-revolution. But I thought the presentation was fabulous. The jewels are amazing, and thank you, Daniel, for sharing.
Thank you, brother. It's really a pleasure, really.
I was telling Daniel, I was having a chat with him. I said, "You East Coast lodges seem to have all the fun."
And you're right. It is true. And now, mind you, as most Worshipful knows, yes, I'm a Massachusetts Mason. Yes, I've lived here, but I am. You might hate me for saying this, but I'm a California boy. Okay.
That's all right.
I was born and raised in LA, man.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, so let's see. What do you? Let's see. Okay, looks like we got a quick chat here. I'm going to read it. This is from Richard Klein. He's going to read it. How you doing, Richard? Good to see you. Rich, why don't you go and unmute your mic and make the invitation direct?
I thought maybe using a witness protection program.
I know.
No, sorry, the lighting in my room where I have my computer is not so good, but the background I thought would be better. Thank you, Most Worshipful Mendoza. Bellingham Bay Lodge has had a visitation with our Canadian brother since 1906. We are the only lodge that we know of in the world that has had a continuous visitation since 1906 through all the wars, all the depression, and has not been interrupted. Although this year has made that impossible because they closed our border on our visitation to Canada. And it may also affect us in the fall. So this may be the first time in over 100 and whatever, 14 years or so, that we would not be able to visit. But when you could, it would be our honor to have you visit our lodge in Bellingham, Washington. And I know our Canadian brother would be absolutely enjoyed with having any of you that could make that. But it happens in April and October. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been to those visitations. They're fantastic. By the way, right, worshipful sir, I don't mean to stir. I really don't. But Daniel needs to tell this story. Dan, you made a comment that your lodge is met continuously.
Yes.
Even in these times.
We almost got in trouble, but yes.
Go well.
Well, when all this happened, when everything happened, I was in California, and I actually drove across the country, COVID land. It was pretty surreal, very surreal. It was the last week of March. And then I got back in time. Originally, we were going to come later, but I was wondering, so what's going to happen? Because the Grand Master of Massachusetts had said all lodges are closed, end of story. And said, oh, that's terrible for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's, obviously it's horrible because we know about, COVID and all that. But then I thought, as the immediate past master, I'm still the junior past master for another month. I think, oh, this is my baby, 225 years. No. So anyway, our current worshipful master is actually he's a right worshipful past district deputy grand master. And he says, I've already done my purple tour. I have no further aspirations. He said, we're going for it. And, there was some loggerheads with the district deputy. And I said, well, what can I do? He said, well, you keep out of it because I don't want you to get in trouble. But he said, I can't get in trouble, him, So we showed up. And just the top officers, we had the master, the wardens, and the marshal. I'm the marshal. So, we wore our mask and we just opened the lodge, had a very short meeting, and closed the lodge. And we were done. And there wasn't as much blowback as we thought there would be. And then we did it again, and we haven't missed. And then we always go dark in July. So we don't meet July, August, because this is a tourist town and people are working too hard usually. So it was just twice we did that, but nobody got kicked out of the fraternity or anything.
Again, we're worshipful. Don't mean to stir.
Yeah, and I did.
Oh no, I get it. You got two members of the of our jurisdiction jurisprudence committee here too.
Well, you can't touch us. We're Massachusetts.
No, we're having a lot of fun with that. Wow. Okay. So, does anybody else have anything before we wrap things up?
I could talk for hours too. I'm excited to hear about the Morgan affair and how that caused your building to be sold and how all that. That's going to be an exciting part 2 or 3 or whatever section that comes into.
It's not something that I know really well. There's a whole bunch in here, for like the charter. Actually, there's a photo here. Note that there is. Yeah, it's really bad picture, but I'm gonna hold it up. Can you see this very well at all?
Eh.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, that's the charter. It's bad. But
with the creases, you can see the creases.
Big creases, yeah, and that's from that time. And It's why the building was sold. But it turned out to be actually fine in the end because the lodge building was too small and too meager, because I mentioned during the whaling years, the lodge became extremely wealthy, and the lodge room that I showed you is just wow. You walk in and wow, so they needed something more spectacular and they got it. So,
Fantastic. So, Daniel, yes, there will be a part 2 and 3, and we're going to do this again because we have just literally scratched the surface. And by the way, I should point out, very much Brother David Colbeth does a little thing called the Working Tools Podcast. So he might be here. You two might be talking.
Sure. Well.
So yeah, with that, before I announce the calendar for August and wrap things up, David, quick commercial on the podcast.
Thank you, Most Worshipful. Just yesterday, we released part 1 of 2-part series from our Grandmaster, Most Worshipful Chris Kaufman, and so hopefully you've had a chance to listen. You can of course watch it on YouTube, or you can listen to it on almost any podcast. It's syndicated through iTunes and Google Podcast and Stitcher and Spotify, and then like 6 or 8 more. Part 2 will be next week, and then of course following that, we've got someone that has been famous in District 13, right worshipful brother Moises Gomez. We've got a 2-part, maybe 3-part. We had a really fun intermission on the show. Little secrets here. We're too cheap to pay for the paid version, and so it forces us to be 30 minutes, which is actually great for viewership. But we shot the first part, and then we got on, and we were just kind of chit-chatting before the next part talked, and 20 minutes later, we were still kind of chit-chatting, but it was a great conversation. And so we ended that one, and then started our second segment, but we may have a third segment in there, possibly that'll be 15, 20 minutes, pretty a short one, but he's such a great, Daniel was amazing presentation tonight, but Moises is a wonderful speaker, and he's so full of information. I thought he might try and be here tonight, but it's tough East Coast. We kept him up till after midnight that night. We kept talking, but it's been fun. We also have a not a hard commitment, but a pretty firm commitment from the Imperial Potentate, and so he'll be on probably in a couple of weeks. We're hoping. So we got some great speakers lined up.
So again, I'll go on YouTube, the Working Tools Podcast, or on any podcast network. So again, next Monday, we will have Sean Iyer from the George Washington National Masonic Memorial. On the 10th, Most Worshipful Brother Barry Birch. On the 17th, Jeremy Yielding, again, talking about the Morgan affairs. So Dan, you might want to come back for that. Yeah. And then on the 24th, Brett Morris from the Southern Jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite, talking about the history of the high degrees. Lots of great stuff coming up. And again, because it's my lodge, Frank S. Land, this coming Wednesday, Arya Freewalt, Grand Worthy Associate Advisor. Then on the 5th of August, Stacy Gould going to talk about how a plague develops. And then we'll take a couple weeks off. We'll get back to you on that. Hope that you'll join us. With that, I want to thank everyone. I'm going to hit, obviously when I'm done, hit stop record. I'll be sending it to David so David could do his little magic, and we'll have this up on the not only on the District 13 YouTube channel, but also on the District 13 Facebook page, so that way you can kind of view this again. With that, again, Daniel, thank you so very much. We're looking so forward to having you back again, because Nick wants it. So that's why we're going to do it.
Thank you, brother, worshipful brethren, all. It's been such a pleasure, and we're kind of stir crazy over here on the sandy, forgotten tip of Cape Cod. So anything I can do to meet other people and talk to you guys. So thank you.
Thanks again. And by the way, Dan, your parents live in Washington, right?
Yeah, that's how we met, because my parents live in Renton, and I have sisters in Newcastle and in Covington and buddies in Capitol Hill, and I go there quite often.
So here's what happens. Whenever he comes to town, he sends me an email. He sends me a message, want to know if there's a lodge. So if your lodge is meeting, Daniel and I are coming. All right?
Right. I went to Shoreline Lodge one night. I went to Frank Land, of course. Yeah, it's great. And what's the one I can't pronounce, brother?
We went to Stillicum.
That's the one I can't pronounce.
We went to Stillicum. So,
yeah.
So if he's in town, he's going to drop me a message. we're going to find you. We're going to find you. So it might be kind of difficult for us to come to Eastern Washington, but we'll give you a fine. Any event, brethren, thank you so very much for being here. Daniel, thank you for that. We're looking forward to part 2. We'll catch you all soon. Bye-bye now.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
All right.